Happy Thursday, everybody, and welcome to another video tutorial. I'm Atenas, and this is Mode Bespoke, and today we are going to be working on the Suzette cowl. And this is a super soft and really warm cowl that you only need one skein of yarn to make. It is a beginner-friendly project, and it will take you a day to make, unless you're a really quick crocheter. You can wear this cowl in two different ways, so you can wear it around your neck like a scarf, or you can also wear it over your head because it is a hooded cowl. So let me take you to the materials page and let's get started. So the materials we're going to need for this tutorial is your yarn, a J hook, and it's a 6mm hook, a yarn needle, and some scissors. Now for your yarn options, you've got two different options because I've used them both and I love them both. They're both by Lion Brand yarns. I'm going to be using the Comfy Cotton blend for this tutorial, and they also make one that is called Scarfie. They didn't have any at the store when I went to pick some of my yarn up, otherwise I would have had some to show you. But it is called Scarfie. The skein has more yardage, so it'll be a longer cowl if you want a longer cowl. It is also fuzzier than this cotton yarn, so it just kind of depends what kind of feel you want for your cowl. So give them both a shot, see which one you like best, but you only need one skein for this project. So if you want more information about the materials, just look in the description below. I made a list of the materials for this tutorial. So to begin, we are going to be making a slip knot. So wrap the yarn around 2 fingers, and you're going to insert your hook into that loop, grab the thread of yarn that's behind it, and pull it through your loop. To tighten it, you're just going to pull on the 2 ends of yarn. Now we're going to be making a chain of 54 stitches. I'll zoom in, and for those who don't know how to make a chain, pinch the knot right next to your hook, and then yarn over and pull through your loop. So wrap the yarn around your hook and pull through the loop. It's called yarning over. Let's yarn over and pull through the loop. So make a chain of 54 stitches, and I'll see you here again when we are done. So I have completed my chain of 54 stitches, and now we're going to be moving into our next row. So chain 1, so we're going to have 55, and we're going to be working into the second stitch from your hook, which is this guy right here. So turn your chain towards the side. So you see these bumps? That's where we're going to be working. So insert your hook into the second stitch from your hook, yarn over, and pull your hook through your stitch. So you're going to be left with 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over and pull through both loops. This is called a single crochet. Go into the next stitch, so just turn your chain to the side, insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over, pull it through the stitch. You're going to be left with 2 loops, yarn over and pull through both loops. So we've made a second single crochet. Go into the next stitch, insert your hook, yarn over and pull through. Now just yarn over and pull through both loops. So we're going to work a single crochet into every stitch of our chain. So you're going to be left with 54 single crochets. So I'm just going to keep working a single crochet into every stitch. I will make maybe 1 or 2 more, and then I'll show you what our first row is going to look like. So this is what your row is going to look like after you've made a single crochet in every stitch. So I'll keep working here and I'll see you again in just a moment. Alright, so my first row is done and I've made a single crochet in every stitch, and this is just my last stitch. So make a single crochet in that very last stitch. So I'll just insert my hook, yarn over, pull through my stitch, and just yarn over and pull through both loops for my single crochet. And for our second row, we're going to need to start with a chain 1. So we'll make our chain 1 and we're going to turn our work around. We're going to be working into this very first stitch, but if you're unfamiliar what the stitches look like, this is the first one, so we're going to insert our hook and work into this one. But if you have trouble looking at the stitches, let me move my yarn over. If you look at the top of your work, you're going to see this little V. That's a stitch. So when you insert your hook, make sure you go through both loops. So you'll see the V through like above your hook. So go into the very first stitch. You're going to yarn over and we're going to make a slip stitch. So just pull that first loop through the second loop on your hook. Don't worry, we'll do this again. Now we're going to make a double crochet into that same stitch. So yarn over, insert your hook into the same stitch, yarn over and pull through the stitch. Now we have 3 loops on our hook, so you're going to yarn over, pull through 2 of those loops, and then we're going to yarn over and pull through the remaining 2 loops. We're going to go over this a couple more times, so don't stress if you didn't catch it this first time. We're going to skip the second stitch and go into the third. So insert your hook and we're going to make a slip stitch. So yarn over, pull your hook through the loop. You've got your first and second loops, so the loop that's closest to your yarn, you're going to loop that into the first loop, which is the one that's closest to your hand. Now yarn over, insert your hook into that same stitch, yarn over again and pull through your loop. So you've got 3 loops on your hook. So now yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and we're going to yarn over and pull through 2 loops. That's a double crochet. Skip a stitch, go into the what is this, 5th stitch, and we're going to do the same. So we're going to make a slip stitch and a double crochet into that stitch. So we're going to yarn over, pull through, and then we're just going to pull that first loop through our second loop. Now we're going to yarn over, insert our hook into the stitch, yarn over and pull through that stitch. We've got 3 loops on our hook, so we yarn over and pull through 2 loops. We've got 2 loops left, so we yarn over and pull through the remaining 2 loops. Skip a stitch, and we're going to do it again. So slip stitch, and now we double crochet. And this is going to create what is called the Suzette stitch. So if you ever have to use a Suzette stitch, this is how you work the stitch. So it's always a a slip stitch. So it's a slip stitch and a double crochet in the same stitch. And then you always skip the next stitch and then repeat it. So I'm going to keep working a few more of these in case anyone needs to keep practicing. So I'll finish my double crochet. We're going to skip a stitch, go into the stitch right after that, insert our hook and make a slip stitch, yarn over and make a double crochet in the same stitch. So I'll let you keep watching in case you need to see more of this, and I will talk to you again here in a moment. I will finish this last stitch and I will show you what our row is going to begin to look like. Keep making a Suzette stitch until you get to the very end of the row, and I'll see you on the last stitch. So I'm at my last stitch of the row. I just finished my double crochet in the previous stitch. So for this last stitch, insert your hook, yarn over, pull through, and make a single crochet. So you yarn over and pull through 2 loops. So we have finished row number 2. For row number 3, we're going to chain 1, turn our work around, and we're going to be skipping the very first stitch, which is this guy right here. So when we made our Suzette stitch, we made these little bumps. So like these little guys right here, that's what we're going to be crocheting into, and that's every other stitch. So go into the second stitch. If you can't see your stitch, turn your work sideways. Go into the second stitch from your hook, and we're going to skip 1 and go into every even numbered stitch for this row. So if I move my yarn, it's going to be this stitch right here. So these tiny little stitches, that is from our slip stitch. So if you're having a hard time inserting your hook into the stitch, go into the big stitch which is next to it, because that is the stitch we're going to be working into. So it's the big one, not the little one. So to begin this row, we're going to skip this first tiny little stitch, go into the second stitch, which is this big guy right here, turn it to the side so that you can see your stitch better, and insert your hook and repeat the Suzette stitch. So slip stitch, and then we yarn over and make a double crochet in that same stitch. So I'll go over it here in the next stitch over. So I'll just close my double crochet. We're going to skip this tiny little stitch right here, go into the next big one. So turn your work sideways if it makes it easier for you to see. It does for me. So insert your hook and make a slip stitch. And now we're going to follow with a double crochet. So into that same stitch, we're going to make a double crochet. And we have made our Suzette stitch. So we're going to skip this tiny little guy, go into the one right next to it, and make another Suzette stitch. So we're going to insert our hook here at the very top, and we're going to make a slip stitch. And now we're going to make a double crochet into that same stitch. So what this is going to do is it's going to start to stack your Suzette stitches, and it's going to make these nice little columns. So your rows and your columns are going to be very nice and very even. And it's going to create a very beautiful texture. So we're going to skip that tiny stitch, go into the next Suzette stitch, and we're going to make a slip stitch. And in that same stitch, we're going to make a double crochet. Oh, it's through 2 loops, there we go, and yarn over and pull through 2. So we're going to skip a stitch, go into the next one and make a slip stitch. And now we're going to make a double crochet in that same stitch. If you're having trouble keeping up, go back to the beginning of the second row and try to practice the Suzette stitch a few times. If you find that you are still having trouble understanding how to make it, just leave me a comment down in the comments below. Let me know, and I will make a tutorial that focuses only on the Suzette stitch. So if you're having trouble, let me know. Otherwise, just keep working a Suzette stitch into every Suzette stitch of this row. So see how it's starting to stack up? Keep working this stitch the same way all the way to the end of the row, and I will see you there. So now that we are at the end, we've got one last Suzette stitch right over here. So we're going to skip this tiny little guy, go into the stitch after that, and we're going to start with our slip stitch and our double crochet in the same stitch. Now for this last stitch of our row, we are going to make a single crochet. So insert your hook into this last stitch and single crochet. So yarn over and pull through 2 loops. For our next row, we're going to chain 1, turn our work around, and just like we did in the previous row, we're skipping the tiny stitch and going into the second stitch of the row, which is the big one, and we're going to make a slip stitch. Now we're going to make a double crochet into that same stitch. So we're going to make a Suzette stitch. And we're going to move on to the next one. So we skip this tiny stitch, go into the next big one, which is this one right here. And we're going to make another Suzette stitch. So insert your hook and make a slip stitch. And follow that up by making a double crochet into that same stitch. And move on to the next one. So skip the tiny one, go into the next big stitch, and make another Suzette stitch. So slip stitch and make a double crochet into the same stitch. So at this point of the pattern, you should have noticed at least, that it's getting pretty repetitive. And that is the beauty of this pattern with the Suzette stitch, is that once you learn how to make a Suzette stitch, the rest of the cowl is really easy to make. So for the remaining part of the pattern, which is all the rest of the rows you're going to keep working on, you're just going to make a Suzette stitch into every Suzette stitch of the previous row. So it's just a repetition of these past 2 rows over and over again until you finish your yarn. So I'm going to keep working this just a couple more of these stitches in case you still need to see how to make the Suzette stitch. I'll show you how to finish the row one last time, and then I'm going to leave you to work on the rest of your cowl. You will be left with a little bit of yarn. Don't use up your entire skein, because you will still need to stitch your cowl closed. So leave some yarn. I'll show you about how much you're going to be left with here in a moment. And yeah, just keep working through this. I'll see you here in a moment to show you how to finish this row and how you'll be finishing every row from here on out. I have one last Suzette stitch to work, and while I'm making that, I'll tell you a little bit here about the end. So you're going to do this for every single end of the row, and it's going to look a little bit of a mess, and that's because of our single crochet in our chain 1. So it's this little edge over here. Try to work into the last stitch. It's going to be the easiest one to insert your hook into. You still shouldn't have a problem making that stitch though. So insert your hook and make a single crochet. And that is how you're going to end every single one of your rows. Begin your row with a chain 1. I need more yarn here. And always skip the first stitch and work into the second one. So keep repeating this pattern until you are nearly out of yarn. And I will show you what nearly out of yarn looks like here in a moment. But keep making a Suzette stitch above every Suzette stitch. You will end up with a piece of a piece of work. So your cowl, before you sew it together, will be about 21 inches. So it should be just a little over, between 21 to 21.5 inches. So keep working this until you have about that length, and then I will show you how to sew it together. So I'll keep working on this, and I will see you when I'm done. So I've been working on this for a couple of hours, and I am now done. So you have some measurements. The width of our project is about 14 inches, and the length is 21 to 21.5 inches. So it's just over 21 inches. So now to finish this up, I made my single crochet as the very last stitch, and now I just have my hook like I normally would. So I'm just going to pull the yarn a little bit up so that I can insert my fingers into that loop and just pull the yarn out. So this is all the yarn I am left with. As you can see, it's not a lot of yarn. This is all that's left of the skein, and we're going to use this yarn to sew our cowl closed. So I'll pull my yarn out, tighten that up a bit, and we're going to go back to the beginning of this the cowl. So this is the row where we made our single crochets. This is what we're going to cover with the last row, which is the Suzette stitch. So if I dim my lights a little, you might be able to see it better. Here. There we go. So it's this lacy Suzette stitch that's going to cover over here. And we're going to sew it together so that we don't have a very noticeable seam. If you stack them up, so you have the Suzette stitch on top, you'll have a slightly less noticeable seam. If you're really good at sewing, you'll be able to create a seamless look. You can also sew it this way, but it's going to create a very visible look, or a very visible seam, excuse me. So I'm going to show you how to sew it so that you can stack it up. So I'm just going to get to the end of my yarn, and I'm going to grab a yarn hook. So because this stitch is so much wider than a lot of the other stitches I use, and it's a thicker yarn, I can use a yarn needle. Most of the time I just use a tapestry needle, but really you can use any needle that will fit your yarn. Alright, so join your ends together and make sure that your project is not twisted. Because you don't want to have a twisted cowl. I mean, unless that's the look you really want, but make sure that it's not twisted, and line up your edges. So I'm just going to insert my needle to the top and just give it two or three good stitches here on top so that I make sure that my cowl isn't going to open up while I'm wearing it. So I'll give it another stitch here at the top. And keeping the two edges lined up, you're just going to insert your needle and just go in and out. And that will, here I'll zoom in. and that will sew up your edges. So pull your needle out and then just line it up again and insert your needle pretty close to where your needle came out last time. And we're going to sew that up. So I will keep recording here so you can see how I work these stitches in case you need to see. If you know how to sew, just sew it shut and you're done. But for those who are not quite sure how to do it, I'll just leave this rolling a bit, and that way you can see how I am sewing this closed. So every time I go to insert my needle, I just make sure that my edges are aligned so that I don't end up stitching too far in the back of the cowl and end up making my cowl narrower. So I really just want my edges, like the top edges and the bottom edges, to just completely line up. There we go. So I'll give this a couple more stitches and show you what the seam looks like. And then I will leave you to continue sewing this. So I'm just going to zoom out so you can see what the seam is going to look like. It's not terribly noticeable. If you are really, just take your time sewing it and you will make it almost invisible. So now I'm at my last couple of stitches, and I'll just show you how to finish stitching this and weaving your ends for anyone who's unfamiliar with how to do that. So I'll just get my last stitch and give it a good couple of stitches here at the end, just like I did at the beginning. Go get that end right there. And now I'm going to go into the back of the cowl and I'm going to weave in my ends. So I'm going to give it just make a double knot back here just to make sure that my sewing isn't going to become undone. So I'll make a first knot and then I'll just go through and make a second knot. There we go. And I still have a little bit of yarn left and I don't want to have to weave all of this in. So I'm going to move my needle closer to the project so that I have a long enough tail that I can still weave in all the ends. So maybe just a couple of inches of yarn. So this is all the yarn I'm left with from my skein. So I'm just going to save that for maybe another project. But to weave in the ends, I'm still working in the back of the cowl. I'm just going to insert my needle and just sew back and forth in kind of a square shape to keep the ends from unraveling. So I'll just keep switching directions and hopefully keep the yarn in the needle. But I'll just go back and forth, make a couple of squares here, and that will help me hide my tail end of the yarn, and it'll also keep the yarn from unraveling, which is great. So I think I'll make this last one and I'll try to hide the rest of the yarn. And I will just pick a straight end, insert my needle, and just go all the way through. So I just finished weaving in the ends, gave it a little tug here to hide the last bit of yarn. I'm going to attach a little tag to it like I do all of my work, but that's it. We are done. This is a super soft cowl. As you can see, this is amazing. It is really warm and I do hope you give it a try. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down in the comments section below. Subscribe to the channel to get a new video tutorial every Thursday. Give the video a thumbs up. I love it when you guys like my videos. It makes me feel super warm and fuzzy and special. To see more of my work, you can follow me also on Instagram. I am at mode.bespoke. And you can find the free pattern to this or for this cowl on my blog, and that is modebespoke.blogspot.com. I will post a link in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you again next Thursday.